Welcome everyone. Namaste. I'd like to send a warm welcome to everyone who's joined us today. My name is Shirleen Prasad. I am one of the practice leaders for Asian Family Services. I lead the South Asian team called Asha, which means hope in Hindi. So on behalf of Asian Family Services, welcome. With Asian Family Services, our core business is gambling. So we provide gambling counseling support to anyone who is affected by gambling harm, but also to family members who are affected as well. But during the COVID-19 lockdown, Asian Family Services extended its helpline service, which is in 7 different languages and English. 7 different Asian languages, and English being the 8th one, to anyone who was emotionally affected by COVID-19. And so when we came down to level 1, we got some funding from the Ministry of Health to continue providing emotional support to people who have been affected by COVID-19 until the end of the year. And that's why we're seeing so many of our clients coming in or calling us via phone who have a lot of family violence issues. As you all would have heard, there was a 22% increase in police investigations just in the 2nd week of our lockdown. So this is a very crucial factor, crucial issue that's on the rise. And that's why as an organization, Asian Family Services, we thought that it was important that we as practitioners, but also as people, know correct information that then we can convey to our clients or people in our circles. And that's why we decided to do a webinar. So without further ado, I'd also like to thank our 2 guest speakers today who took out the time to come and give a talk. So thank you, Harry, and thank you, Lena. So Harry Fatu Toleafoa works at Mangere Law Centre. He is as a legal educator, and he is a law graduate from the University of Auckland. We've also got Lena Wong, who is the director partner at Complete Legal Limited. It's based in South Auckland, and it specialises in family law. She has been practicing in family law in South Auckland for the past 5 years, and specialises in family violence, Oranga, Tamariki, and care of children law. So thank you. And over to you, Harry.
Thanks, Shirleen, and thank you, Lena, for taking all the time covering all your qualifications and leaving none for the actual presentation. But good morning, everybody. And like Shirleen said, it's an absolute privilege to be able to touch on a very pertinent topic, especially in light of as we come out of COVID, but also as you look to serve our respective communities and also our particular stakeholders. Ivan, if you could just bring up the presentation, please, and then we'll get into what we've got or what we've put together, or what we've been asked to put together, and we'll just quickly run through the respective agenda. So like Shirleen said, my name is Harry Fatu Toleafoa. Pretty privileged to be working at the Mangere Community Law Centre. So I apply my trade as a legal educator, and I'll unpack that in the next couple of slides or so. So if we can just jump to the next slide, please, Ivan. And we'll just give you guys a brief breakdown in regards to what we're going to cover today. So I'll be just touching a little bit about the community law centres, their function and their respective roles in our community, and how they can help you, not only as practitioners, but also the clients that you serve. I'll pass it over to my colleague Lena over here, who will just touch a little bit about her family law practice and put a shameless plug for their respective law firm. Then we'll look at what family violence is. So what is family violence in regards to the law? And we'll look at the respective elements in what the law actually says about family violence. And we'll touch a little bit on the rights of migrants who experience family violence. What rights do they have under the law? What tools do they have to protect themselves? And what avenues do they have to actually ensure that they're safe first and foremost, but also have services to access. Then Lena will also touch a little bit about legal aid, and then we'll pass it back over to Shirleen, and then have some discussion in regards to any questions and answers, or any questions that you guys actually might have. Cool, sweet. So next slide, please, Ivan. So community law centres in Aotearoa. So there's roughly 24 community law centres in Aotearoa. So depending on where you're tuned in from, just encourage you to jump online. There's 24 throughout the country, and the majority of them are funded by, or well, we're all funded by the Ministry of Justice. All right, so I work for the Community Law Centre in Mangere. If you're based in Auckland, there's another, I think, 4. So there's one that's Watamata, which services West Auckland, as well as the North Shore. There's Auckland Community Law Centre, which services Central Auckland. And then there's Community Services South Auckland Trust, or formerly known as Otara Community Law, which services the rest of South Auckland. You might be tuning in from throughout the country, so just get in touch with your local law centre. But one thing I do want to touch on is each law centre has their own specialty. So depending on the staff that they have on board, some might have a specialty with family law. So for example, we've got a specialty with family law because 3 of our practitioners look after particular family law matters, and we've also got an immigration consultant. So your respective community law centre might have other specialties. Just get in contact with them, and they're free. I've put an asterisk next to free because some services, the initial service or consultation might be free, but if they have to take it to court, then there might be fees that are obviously charged, but that's basically obviously because we're not fully funded, or we don't have the funds, perhaps like Lena does, to take it to the High Court or the Supreme Court. If I can just get that slide, please, up, Ivan, the Community Law Centre slide, sorry.
Oh.
See, Ivan's just having a sleep. This is the problem of Zoom, you know, Ivan is in his PJs, so Ivan, if you could just wake up.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm having a little bit of technical problems suddenly. I shouldn't have moved anything. Just hold on for a second. Hold on. Yeah.
So no worries. So what I'll just continue, but what basically just the role of community law services is something that's affordable. We want our community to actually be able to access justice. So we know with a number of our clients, especially our migrant clients, as well as my respective community, barriers to justice, especially cost, is quite expensive. So community law centres are generally your first port of call. It's free, we can assist, but one of our key roles is to ensure that we participate in forums like this, which provides legal education. The more informed our community are, the less likely they are to be taken advantage of or make ill decisions. 34% of all of our work across community law centres is family law related. So we'll unpack what family law means very shortly, but that's the community law website. So www.communitylaw.org.nz. That's a community law website. It's got a ton of resources up there. We've got letters in which, templated letters in which you can download to assist your clients or your tenants or migrants that you're working with. That covers everything from consumer to tenancy and so on and so forth. So that, in a nutshell, community law centres, free. Please contact your local community law centre, get in touch, build that rapport. Any legal issues that you might have, you'll be able to get in touch with a community law centre. So that's a little bit about myself and the work that community law centres do throughout the country. And I'll just pass it over to Lena, who will just run through the next slide. Thanks, Ivan.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. As you all now know, my name is Lena, and I am a partner at Complete Legal Limited, which is a South Auckland-based law firm. We are a specialist family law firm, although we do run a general practice. That's a picture of my team. I don't know why that's there, but that's all right. With my practice in particular is focused around, as Shirleen said, family violence, parenting matters, as well as issues arising from Oranga Tamariki. We are a legal aid provider, which means that all of my staff here are able to provide legal aid services, which is basically government-funded lawyers for any kind of legal work within the family court. We also offer something called Family Legal Advice Service, which is basically specific advice for parents who are separating and really giving them kind of general advice about how children custody law works. Well, my firm our main branch is out in Pukekohe, but we have offices in Papakura, and we kind of extend all over Auckland, depending on where the need is. Our practice is very, how can I say, ground facing. We are based in South Auckland, so we have a practice that really focuses on the issues that are really happening amongst our communities. As Shirleen highlighted, COVID-19 was hard for a lot of our families, and we saw it a lot in the court system. So it's really important for my practice, and to be fair, a lot of the South Auckland lawyers, that we get out and we participate in these kinds of forums, because we know that our families are struggling. And family violence, in our view, is something that needs to be addressed really strongly. We all read the newspapers, we know how bad things can get. So there is a group of lawyers, particularly in the South Auckland area, who will go out and join these forums, because ultimately we want our communities to be safe, and we want to be able to help people in need. So that's essentially the ethos of my firm, and it's a pleasure and an honour for us to be able to share a little bit of what we know with you all today. Cool.
Great. So what exactly do we mean by family law before we enter into family violence, before we unpack what family violence means? I'll let Lena just touch a little bit about what we mean by family law. What exactly does this cover? And then it'll just set us up as we move into what the law says about family violence.
So family law is really basically, we have this term that we use in family law practice, which is, family law is all the law that touches you from your cradle to your grave. So it's anything from children's law, first decent marriages, paternity proceedings, child support proceedings, right through to, you entering adulthood. So we've got youth justice, which is part of what we carry, what we do. We've then look at trusts, estates, wills, right through to estates when you do pass away. So family law is really, it's a very, very broad practice, but we really are looking at issues that affect people from right from babies through to the elderly, and anything really in between. Yeah.
Great. All right, so let's look at what we mean by family violence, or what is family violence, and what does the law actually define family violence as. So Ivan, please. Cool. So many of us might have heard this, kind of a new term, but in a way it was formerly known as domestic violence. All right. So we always heard of this term domestic violence. Well, the genius people down in Wellington have rebranded it as family violence. All right. So we'll unpack exactly what that means. But family violence is under this particular act, or it's the Framework Act, which is called the Family Violence Act 2018. And basically it defines what family violence means. So family violence is basically violence that's inflicted against a person or by another person to a member in a family, or someone who has a family relationship. And we'll unpack that very shortly. So what do we mean by violence? So Section 9 unpacks it and kind of defines it in three key terms, or three key concepts. So it's physical abuse, sexual abuse, and psychological abuse. And in the last two ones is basically, it can be a one-off incident or can be a demonstrated pattern of behavior. And what we're seeing more and more of, or what they've included, is also dowry-related violence, but we'll unpack it a little bit shortly, okay? So let me just put this together in real simple terms, all right? So yeah, next slide, thanks, Ivan. So in order for us to be able to determine what family violence is, there must first be a family relationship. So we'll unpack exactly what a family relationship is. Then there has to be abuse of those particular kinds, so physical, sexual, or psychological. Once you meet these two particular elements, then you've met, or then you've fulfilled what's known as family violence under the Family Violence Act 2018, and you can be charged under New Zealand law. Okay, so what exactly do we mean by family relationship? Let's unpack that. So the Act gives us a definition. So next slide, please. So a person is in a family relationship, number one, if they are a spouse or a partner. Secondly, that they're either a family member, and this is where it gets interesting. The third one is that they ordinarily share or live in a household with someone. Okay, so note that it's not necessarily blood ties. You could just be staying in the house with them, or you can have a close and personal relationship. Okay, so you look at the second half of the slide. So what do we mean by sharing a household? Well, it can't be a landlord and a tenant. Can't be you living with your boss or an employee and employee. Could even just be flatmates for that matter. Okay. And what do we mean by a close relationship? How do they measure a close relationship? Well, you look at the amount of time you guys spent together, the places where that time is spent together, the manner in which that time is spent, and they also look at the duration. Because, I mean, you could be first cousins, but you've only stayed together for 1 month or a week or see each other often. So you want to share a little bit about what this family relationship is?
Yeah, so what Harry touched on was in 2018, the government decided that they wanted to extend the definition of family violence. So prior to this, we had what we call the Domestic Violence Act 1995. And the Domestic Violence Act was actually quite tight in terms of defining what domestic violence was and how it could apply to different people. So under the old act, it used to just be you were a family member, so husband and wife, brother and sister, son and daughter. It was, father and daughter. It was those, the definition was quite compact. Now, over the years, we've seen that domestic violence, obviously numbers increased. So Parliament and the politicians down in Wellington thought, well, we really need to address it. So in comes the Family Violence Act in 2018. Now, what it did really was extended the definition of family relationships. So it's opened it up to a much wider community. And that was really to address, if we're honest, a lot of our migrant families. Because in normal New Zealand families, you have mum, dad, and the children living in a house. And that's all good and well, but the reality is the face of New Zealand was changing. And as you know, for a lot of, I'm from a Pacific family, and Pacific families have mum, dad, grandparents, auntie and uncle, cousins and stuff, all living on one property. So what this act aimed to really address was extending that definition to capture those kinds of homes, which is obviously particularly important with a lot of our migrant families. So that's where the definition of family relationship kind of extended. What the new act also wanted to do was look at defining what family violence actually means. So in this slide, we're talking a little bit about family relationships. So it went from not only spouse or partner to a family member, but people that live in the same kind of housing arrangement. So you might think of situations where you've got mum, dad, the kids, and then maybe one of the daughters has a boyfriend who lives in the house. Now, they are not family specifically because they're not married or anything, but they all share a household. So this act starts to kind of capture those people as well.
So yeah, that's one of the key things one of the key distinctions from domestic violence before is that now exactly what Lena touched on, it's not just your blood or your kin relationships, it's people who stay within this respective household. So now it's a broader definition, and in many ways it's good because it provides protection for everybody who stays within the household. But the common thinking or the common connotations when people mention family are your kin relationships or your blood relations. That's not the case anymore under the law. Now when you're advising clients, you probably want to probe who stays in your household, who lives in your household, because that's nowadays they can actually obviously charge you under family violence if incidents do go down. So that's one of the key things to remember, is that it's no longer just spousal partners or family members, it's people who share households and also have a close relationship. Cool? So that's what we mean by the family relationship. So when you're advising a client and you see, okay, are these guys, have they been victims of family violence? The first thing we have to determine, are they in a family relationship? They no longer blood anymore, but do they stay in the same household and do they have a close personal relationship? Cool, so let's look, that's the first element. So let's look at the second element, which is abuse, right? So remember how we determined abuse was the first kind of three-prong kind of test, or not three-prong test, but three aspects of it. So like I said from the outset, it can be a single act, could just be a one-off single act, or it could be a demonstrated pattern of behavior, right? It could be abuse. Say, for example, I get paid on Wednesday and all the outgoings go out and I keep on abusing my wife on Thursday because of financial constraints. So remember, it's not just physical abuse, it's psychological and also sexual as well. So let's look at what psychological abuse and what it includes in the act. So that just includes threats, harassment, damage to property, ill treatment of pets, ladies and gentlemen. It's, believe it or not, it's one of, not common, but it's something in which the act has kind of captured. You want to speak a little bit about ill treatment of pets?
So essentially, again, with the new act that they extended, like I said before, they extended the definition of abuse. So we have all the normal, or not normal stuff, but the regular threats, harassment, and willful damage of property. But it did also stretch out to ill treatment of pets, because what we have is a lot of these people who would kind of take animals and abuse animals to hurt the partner. So the act actually extended out to capture that as an act of abuse, which is something that can be prosecuted. So what we need to be mindful of here is that there's two kinds of things that fall in with family violence, all right? Family violence is what we talk about in the family court, but obviously all of these things can be prosecuted in the criminal court as well. So there are obviously the Crimes Act covers abuse of animals, but what the family violence then said is, well, we need to think about these animals within the context of the family. So these are all the kinds of things that the family violence is now capturing. Of particular relevance to a lot of the families that I have out in South Auckland is financial and economic abuse. So that's where you've got mum and dad. Dad's the main breadwinner, and dad withholds money from mum, okay? Which means that, you know, she gets an allowance of however much, but he's very controlling of the money and doesn't give her any, and, you know, kind of says, you've got $20 to feed our children for the next week. So we can start to use those kinds of instances as examples of financial or economic abuse. Now, it's really important, especially for our low socioeconomic groups, that this definition was extended to capture those kinds of events, because as we know, it's all too common. And it was really good, I guess, for our communities that this was actually now legislated against, so that we can start to protect, you know, generally the woman or the partner, the non-earning partner, in these kinds of relationships. Physical and sexual abuse is obviously quite self-explanatory. That hasn't changed. So that's essentially it. I think what one of the things that I want to talk about is around, so Harry talks about abuse can be a single act. So you get punched in the face, you say, well, I've been, you know, abused, and this is family violence. The definition, which talks about a pattern of behavior, is really in relation to psychological abuse, okay? So the idea is that psychological abuse generally tends to manifest over time. And so what the Act tries to do is says, look, we need to kind of get several incidents which on their own look all right. You know, it's just kind of a one-off, oh, he took my F+ card and wouldn't give back to me, so my benefit is all gone. Now, on one occasion, that's not terrible. Oh, it's not great, but it's also not terrible. Now, if he's doing this over several months, we start to develop a story, okay? And that's when it can be captured by the Family Violence Act, because we're trying to tell a story of family violence that's happened over time, as opposed to if it just happened once, then it doesn't look that bad. But if we're looking at months of F+ cards being taken or benefits being misused, and kind of harassments and threats and things like that, then it can fall into the categories defined by this Act, and then obviously offer the protections, which we'll talk about shortly.
So by the sounds of it, I'm getting abused by my wife because she takes my card all the time and she takes all my money, but that's exactly what abuse is. It literally can be physical, financial, economic abuse kind of thing. Cool? So we'll just also touch on this particular aspect of abuse for children. So the next slide, please, Ivan. So abuse of a child. So this also falls under psychological abuse. is permitting a child to see, hear, or observe any physical, sexual, or psychological abuse by another family member, or putting that child at risk of seeing or hearing that particular abuse.
So this is one of the things that we really want to touch on in terms of the effects of family violence in the home and the effect on the children, okay? Because what we do have a lot in our courts is we get a lot of parents who come in and they say, oh, you know, they were really lovely to the children, they beat me or psychologically abused me or took all my money, but they never touched the kids. What the Family Violence Act says, well, that doesn't matter. You don't have to kind of hit or sexually abuse or psychologically abuse the child directly. But if there is a child in the home that's witnessing or hearing or kind of being involved in those kinds of arguments, that actually falls under the definition as well. And it's when you get this kind of stuff happening continually that you get organisations like Oranga Tamariki and stuff coming in to say, well, actually, we need to be looking a lot closer at what's going on in this home. So I think from our perspective, what we want to be advising our families all the time is it's not just that he's hitting you or she's hitting you. It's about what your children are seeing and making sure that we can protect our kids from that, because obviously, you know, the newspapers will tell you that this kind of stuff isn't okay and it shouldn't be happening around children, and it's up to us to kind of protect those the exposure of all of this.
Yeah, one of the key things, like Lena said, is that although they may not have hit the child or they might have just hit their spouse or whatever, the Family Violence Act protects children from being exposed to that. And you look at the literature, children are like cameras in terms of what they observe and what they see. It impacts them psychologically and the cognitive functions as they grow up. And if they're observing these things as young individuals growing up, then it will have a profound effect on them growing, in their progression into adulthood. Cool, so I think we'll just move on to the next one. And that basically, in a nutshell, if we were to put it together, is what we mean by family violence as defined in the New Zealand law here in Aotearoa. Number one, have you established a family relationship? Like I said, it's not just kin anymore, it's a shared household, and they look at the close proximity of the relationship. Secondly, has there been a single act or a pattern of abuse, psychologically, physically, or sexually, or even financially and economically? And if you've met those two limbs, then basically your respective client or you've been subjected to family violence. And now we're going to demonstrate exactly what protections are available, not only for migrants, but also for yourselves and your respective clients that you are looking to advise. So on that note, because I'm an educator by trade, we'll park for a 20-second break, a 1 minute break there before we just go into the next part of the session. But that's family violence in accordance with what the legal definitions are. Feel free to check up any questions in the chat, and we'll just consider that as we go on through. But hopefully that's provided a real succinct kind of summary. I know it's a bit dense, some of the content that we've covered there, but in essence, those are the two major elements. Once you meet that, then you'll basically meet the definition under the law. And then in the next section, we'll look at what protections are available for migrants and our community at large, and also special category visas and protections available there. Cool. So just a 1 minute break, Ivan, and so get yourself a cup of tea, and then we'll kick back off in the next minute or so, and we'll go from there.
Sure. Thank you, Harry. Yep, all good. Please, if anyone has any questions, please do write it in the email section, chat section, and Ivan and I will discuss it and facilitate it at the end of the talk. Thank you.